But he also points out that the numbers that stay with me are not barrels or tons, and he's quite right. The number that sticks with me is 600 million, and it is a conversation that we have often in our organization, and that's how many people the IEA says lives without electricity in the sub-Saharan Africa. And in the 21st century, without the most basic service that Westerners treat as an expectation. But let me just say also now, increasingly in those Western economies, is increasingly the language around energy poverty, and people who considered them energy rich and consider themselves able to actually access this kind of energy reliability now find that the affordability around energy is quite compromised. But let's just go back with that number of 600 million. Please just hold this in your mind for the remainder of my talk, because every policy and financing choice we discuss ultimately must land on this number.
So the most important finding as well is that supply is declining faster than demand. So this one was an interesting one for me to learn, that as mines deplete and investment in replacement capacity is constrained, significant new capacity will still be required to maintain supply, even when taking into consideration renewables and other sources of energy. So as this chart shows, you can see that only around 20% of today's mining capacity will remain in the future. So even in the declining demand environment, approximately 3 billion tons of coal of new capacity will still be required to replace the depleted production.
Growing economies unable to secure their coal and their systems still require this, that's going to be quite important for us to actually really support those investment decisions that need to be made to really underpin that diversity of the system that needs to happen. And even China, in its 15th five-year plan, has instructed its coal fleet not to close, but actually to upgrade and retrofit. So Beijing has shifted from controlling coal to controlling carbon. And that distinction, in our view, is the whole game. Japan and Korea now are going further. They're paying multi-billion-dollar contracts for difference to convert coal plants to co-firing with ammonia and hydrogen rather than close them. And the most advanced economies on Earth are treating coal assets as decarbonization platforms. So there is that little bit of difference. But equally, we have seen the US now mobilize their trade delegations to places like South Korea and Japan and even to India to now look at how they can actually work with technology and innovation and work in a basis that we can actually expand coal operations, not just from an environmental perspective, but from an efficiency perspective that goes well beyond power.
So what I would like to highlight is that coal still represents 69% of installed generation capacity today. And that is significantly higher than what was earlier forecasted anyway. So this highlights the reality that South Africa must balance its decarbonization ambitions with its immediate context, with the energy security and affordability. So without investment in replacement mines, South Africa's coal production capacity declines materially, but that demand remains. So what we need to guard against is the supply that declines even faster. So meaning at some point we would have the gap. So in the near term, I know the reality today and what we see in the medium term is that domestically it's an oversupply. But what we must look at is what happens after that.
So this is actually quite important because we have to define what coal is capable of beyond the boiler. because this is where the story really drives itself home. And those reasons, when we see those, particularly the US recently in these trade delegations, we know that through gasification, 1 ton of coal becomes fertilizer for farmers, hydrogen for industry, synthetic fuels for national security, methanol, chemicals, and more. So from coal ash, we understand the extraction of critical minerals, or displacing, energy intensive cement, or carbon rich coal becomes carbon fiber and graphene, worth thousands of dollars per ton. These are things where in particular China and India, every ton stewarded in their view is well worth multiples of a ton that would be merely burned or merely banned. And this is at industrial scale in China, and certainly India has its ambition. And I know in the Future Coal African chapter, we have this ambition, and we must really embrace it. And here is the part, I have really been waiting to say. Presenting this to Coaltech, we have come full circle here, because South Africa is the nation that spearheaded coal transformation, turning coal into chemicals and fuels and hydrocarbons at scale, decades before anyone coined this phrase, coal to X. So the world did not teach South Africa gasification. South Africa taught the world. And it's that capability, that intellectual property, that operating experience, which sits in this room, and the energy markets that will become the world's largest economies by mid-century are asking for it. So in this and in many other ways, South Africa is a technology leader in the true sense of the word.
So to better understand the outlook, the long-term outlook for coal, at Exxaro, we commissioned an independent assessment of global coal market fundamentals, just throwing into the views of market forecasters. So what we learned, we didn't just consult with the friends of coal. We also looked at those that might actually not be friends of coal, but will be objective about where coal is going and what they see in the market. So while these organizations differ in assumptions and scenarios, broadly they were aligned on one point, that coal demand is expected to decline. So it's expected to decline over time as countries advance their energy transition plans. We know that. However, the analysis also highlights that coal demand does not disappear. It continues to play a role in global energy systems well beyond 2050, particularly in markets where affordability, reliability, and energy security remain priorities.
But what we know through the IEA is that coal demand is set yet another record in 2025. And investment in coal also remains significant, a 14-year high, driven again by energy security. And 8 Asian governments now have elevated coal in their merit order this year. Japan lifted plant restrictions, Korea removed the output caps, and is actually reviewing its own phase-out policy. The Philippines declared energy emergency and turned to coal. And no petro states, the most sophisticated energy importers on earth, are actually really focusing now on how we can support in a diverse system coal. And meanwhile, mines are depleting and capital has been frightened away a little bit, even though demand keeps rising. So the market is telling us the danger is not stranded coal assets, it's stranded energy demand.
That's why the work that Coaltech that you're doing is becoming even more important today. And I would say we actually need the research at a much faster rate. We can't be waiting for 8 years. Things are moving much, much quicker today. So there's expectation, at least from myself, that we all find ways on how do we still unlock value from coal. Our business might look different in the future, but we must be part of that solution. And we must be the creators of that future and not wait to see what is coming. So through the institutions like Coaltech and others, it's a huge opportunity to see and find out what else can we do with the carbon. and how quickly can we bring that forward?